My name is Rachel Morgan. I'm 34 years old, and I thought closing a $3 million contract in Zurich would be the highlight of my week, until I walked into my own home and found 88 strangers partying in my living room. The driveway was blocked. Strangers stood on my lawn with plastic cups in hand, my teak garden chairs dragged into a sloppy beer-stained circle. Inside, my mother Beverly was directing caterers like she owned the place. My brother Ethan was bartending from my grandfather's antique bar, one he'd sworn he never liked. And overhead, a crooked banner, Morgan Family Reunion 2025. Planned, hosted, celebrated, without me. In the house Grandpa Maxwell left specifically to me. If this kind of story resonates with you, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us keep telling the stories that matter. Let's begin. I thought landing a $3 million contract was the highlight of my week, until I found 88 strangers partying in my living room. The Uber driver slowed as we turned onto my street. "Looks like someone's throwing a bash," he commented, dodging cars double parked on both sides of the road. I sat up straighter, heart tightening. That couldn't be right. I hadn't told anyone I was coming home early from Zurich. My plan had been simple. Sneak into my house, pour a glass of Cabernet, and sit in the garden surrounded by tulips. Grandpa Maxwell and I planted years ago. I'd pictured the scene on the flight. Bare feet on cool grass, jazz playing softly in the background, city lights flickering through the trees. Instead, my lawn looked like a parking lot. Headlights flashed, and the thud of bass reverberated from inside the house. People stood on the porch, laughing, holding plastic cups. My teak garden chairs had been dragged into a sloppy circle, now littered with beer bottles. The Uber couldn't pull into the driveway. I thanked the driver, grabbed my suitcase, and walked the rest of the way. My stomach twisted. No calls, no texts. Just this. At the steps, a teenage boy I didn't recognize pushed past me, nearly toppling a potted plant. A woman I vaguely remembered from some long-ago holiday waved at me. "Hey, more cousins from Chicago just arrived," she shouted. I froze. My front door stood wide open, propped with a ceramic frog from my sunroom. Inside, the air hit me like a wall. Cheap perfume, spilled wine, something fried. Dozens of voices clashed with loud music. My foyer was buried under coats, bags, and gift boxes. A crooked banner hung over the archway. Morgan Family Reunion 2025. Someone bumped into me carrying deviled eggs. Another guest stumbled, knocking over a vase I'd chosen carefully from a boutique in Beacon Hill. I moved deeper, scanning the sea of faces. Distant cousins, forgotten acquaintances, total strangers. Folding tables lined the dining room, stacked with aluminum trays of catered food. My grandmother's candlesticks had been shoved aside to make room for drink dispensers. From the kitchen, I heard my mother's voice. I followed it, pushing past groups of laughing guests. There she stood, Beverly, in my kitchen. Her hair freshly styled, makeup flawless, wearing a blue dress with a corsage pinned on like she was hosting a charity gala. She barked instructions at two catering staff while sipping white wine from one of my crystal glasses. When she spotted me, her smile flickered. Not surprise, not joy, just mild annoyance. "Rachel?" she said, setting down a tray. "What are you doing here? I thought you were in Europe until Sunday." I blinked. "I live here." Her smile thinned. "Obviously, but we didn't expect you back so soon. It's the family reunion, in case you hadn't noticed." "In my house, without telling me." She waved me off. "You're always working anyway. We needed a big space." Before I could respond, Ethan appeared from the dining room wearing a blue button-down with Morgan Family Reunion Host embroidered on the pocket. He carried a tray of empty glasses, grinning like the star of the show. "Oh, you're back early," he said, giving me the same lazy grin he used in high school when caught sneaking out past Q. I wasn't just excluded from the party. I was erased from my own life. Sunlight poured through the gaps in my bedroom curtains, casting pale beams across the floor strewn with discarded clothes and trampled shoes. The air was heavy with the stale scent of alcohol, sweat, and something burnt from last night's reckless cooking experiments. I stood at the top of the stairs, phone in hand, slowly scrolling to the camera app. My throat felt tight, raw from unshed tears and restless sleep. With every step I took, the scope of the damage became clearer. In the living room, the cream-colored rug bore a deep wine stain, still damp to the touch. The coffee table I'd painstakingly refinished over 3 weekends now had fresh scratches and a cigarette burn near the corner. My dining chairs, upholstered in hand-picked fabric from a trip to Savannah, were dented and stained with grease. The family photos I kept on the wall had been taken down, replaced with group shots of people I barely recognized, smiling with plastic cups in their hands. I walked through the dining room, then the library. The sight there almost brought me to my knees. My grandfather's bookshelf, the one we built together the summer before I left for MIT, had a fresh gouge running across its side like an open wound. The antique brass lamp from his study lay toppled on the floor, its shade bent beyond repair. Someone had wedged an empty beer bottle behind the antique globe he'd loved. Moving on autopilot, I climbed the stairs toward my office. The door, always locked, now hung ajar. My stomach twisted. Inside, it was worse than I feared. Drawers stood open, their contents rifled through and scattered across the floor. Work documents I'd marked confidential were exposed, some with footprints across them. My small safe, normally hidden under my desk, had been dragged out, left half open and empty. Panic surged through me like electricity. I stumbled into my bedroom, only to find more chaos waiting. Closet doors stood wide open, clothes shoved aside, hangers tangled. My jewelry box lay tipped over, earrings and bracelets scattered like debris. Even the framed photo of Grandpa and me at my college graduation sat face down on the nightstand. Its glass cracked clean through. My heart pounded. My breaths came shallow and fast. A memory surfaced unbidden. My 8th birthday. The day Mom forgot to order a nut-free cake. I'd stood in the kitchen gasping for air while she laughed with neighbors in the backyard, oblivious. The panic from that day felt eerily close now. I sank onto the edge of my bed and finally did what I should have done hours ago. I called Hannah. She picked up on the second ring. "Morning, superstar. How was Zurich? Did you land Helvetica?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My throat tightened, and for a second, I could barely breathe. "Rachel?" she said, voice dropping. "What's wrong?" I let it spill. The party, the strangers, the invasion, the damage. By the time I finished, I was sobbing into the sleeve of my hoodie. Hannah didn't hesitate. "They've crossed a line, Rachel. More than one." I wiped my face, steadying my breath. "I don't even know where to start." "Start by taking photos of everything," she said firmly. "And then figure out what you're willing to tolerate." Her words rang in my head long after I hung up. Downstairs, Ethan was grumbling in the kitchen, probably nursing a hangover. I could hear Mom laughing at something on her phone, completely unfazed. I pulled out my laptop, ignoring the flood of work emails. Instead, I opened a folder I hadn't looked at in months. Real estate inquiries. There it was. An email from Scott Reynolds, dated 6 months ago. The subject line read, "Strong cash offer, flexible closing, Back Bay Historic District." My cursor hovered over his contact information. My thumb rested on my phone screen. Just one tap. One tap away from making a decision that would change everything. If I wasn't enough for them when I owned the house, maybe I'd be enough once I walked away from it. I stood in the garden, clutching a folded letter worn soft from years of handling. Grandpa Maxwell's handwriting, slanted and sure, stared back at me from the page. Some legacies aren't meant to be protected. They're meant to teach you when to let go. The words pressed heavy on my chest as Scott Reynolds pulled up in his silver sedan. He stepped out, wearing a tailored blazer and his usual too-bright real estate agent smile. Clipboard and a thick portfolio tucked under his arm. "Rachel," he said, offering a handshake that felt both businesslike and cautiously sympathetic. "Didn't expect to hear from you this soon." "I didn't expect to be calling," I replied, leading him through the garden gate toward the patio. We sat beneath the old oak tree Grandpa had planted the year I was born. The lawn still bore the scars from yesterday's chaos. Tulips crushed, lawn chairs out of place, plastic cups lodged between shrubs. Scott opened his folder, laying out comps and pricing models with practiced efficiency. "The market's hot right now. Your location, your square footage, historical designation, you'll get top dollar. And I've still got that cash buyer I mentioned. Victor Yang, tech entrepreneur, recently relocated from California. No inspection contingencies, no financing delays. He can close in 5 days if needed." 5 days. The words made my stomach flip. Fast. Too fast. But maybe that was what I needed. "I want to meet him," I said quietly. Scott nodded. "Of course, but first you'll need legal counsel to review everything. Someone you trust?" Without hesitation, I pulled out my phone and called Diane Matthews. She was efficient, sharp, and had handled my will and estate documents last year. Diane answered on the second ring. After I explained the situation, she promised to arrive within the hour. While waiting, I walked the property with Scott. We toured each room. He took photos, made notes about restoration needs, commented on the original woodwork. When we reached my grandfather's study, he paused, staring at the deep scratch across the antique desk. "Shame about this," he said softly. "It wasn't like that before last night," I murmured. Downstairs, Mom's voice rose, sharp and accusing. "Rachel, why is there a lawyer in the garden? What's going on?" Ethan, still nursing his hangover, emerged from the guest room looking dazed. "Who's the guy with the clipboard?" he asked, squinting through the front window. I ignored both of them. Diane arrived just as Scott finished photographing the exterior. We sat together on the patio, her tablet glowing as she reviewed the initial offer draft. "Rachel," she said gently, "you're making a big decision. Are you sure?" I nodded. "I'm done living like this." Scott's phone buzzed. "That's Victor. He's ready to submit a formal offer. Full cash. Wants a quick close." The noise from inside the house grew louder. Mom pacing, Ethan muttering. I caught glimpses of them through the kitchen blinds, peering out at us, whispering furiously. Diane printed the preliminary documents. We laid them out on the wooden garden table. Next to them, I placed Grandpa's letter, as if his words could anchor me. My hands trembled slightly as I picked up the pen. For a long second, I stared at the signature line. Then, I signed. The ink dried quickly under the afternoon sun, like sealing a fate I couldn't reverse. Just as I set the pen down, the kitchen window slid open with a sharp screech. "Rachel," my mother shouted, "are you out of your mind?" I'd signed the papers, but my family wasn't ready to let me go. Or let go of the house. The morning sun cut through the dining room windows, illuminating the stacks of papers Diane Matthews had laid out on my grandmother's old oak table. Scott Reynolds stood near the window, reviewing the final agreement on his tablet, occasionally glancing at the driveway for signs of Victor Zhang's arrival. I paced between the dining room and the foyer, nerves thrumming under my skin like taut piano strings. The house smelled of stale coffee and floor polish. Diane sat, calm and professional as always, reading through the legal documents one last time. "When people lose control over you," Grandpa Maxwell's words surfaced like an unwelcome whisper. "That's when they fight hardest." I didn't have to wait long to see that truth in action. The sound of tires crunching over gravel made me freeze. Victor's car pulled up, a sleek black sedan with tinted windows. He stepped out, wearing a tailored navy suit, flanked by his assistant, a petite woman carrying a leather briefcase. Victor extended his hand. "Ms. Morgan," he said warmly, "thank you for allowing us to finalize this here." "Please," I said, motioning toward the dining table. "Let's get started." Scott greeted him with the enthusiasm of a man who smelled commission money in the air. Diane stood and offered a brief nod of introduction. Victor surveyed the house with quiet curiosity, pausing for a second longer at the antique molding, the original hardwood floors, the light fixtures my grandfather had installed. When his gaze met mine, there was something unspoken there, an acknowledgement of how hard this must be. As Diane began laying out the documents for signature, the footsteps started. First Ethan, barefoot, eyes bloodshot, hair a mess. Then Beverly, entering like she was stepping onto a stage, silk robe cinched tight, her face set in trembling fury. "Rachel," she hissed, clutching the doorframe. "This is ridiculous. We need to talk." "There's nothing left to talk about," I said evenly. Ethan laughed bitterly. "You're seriously doing this? Selling the house? To a stranger?" Victor and his assistant exchanged glances but remained silent. Diane cleared her throat. "We're in the middle of a legal closing, Mr. Morgan. If you disrupt this process, it could be considered interference with a contractual transaction." "Interference?" Beverly's voice rose to a sharp pitch. "This is our family home. You can't just—" "I can," I interrupted. "Because it's mine. Legally, morally, and now, financially." Scott slid the purchase contract across the table toward me. My pen hovered above the first signature line. Ethan stepped forward, fists clenched. "You think we won't fight this? I'll sue for undue influence." Grandpa was old, confused. Before I could speak, Diane answered coolly. "The statute of limitations for contesting the will expired months ago, and I personally conducted Maxwell Morgan's capacity assessment at the time." Ethan faltered, but Mom surged forward, tears streaking down her face. "You're tearing this family apart, Rachel. For what? Money, pride, revenge?" I stood, locking eyes with her. "For peace." Victor placed a cashier's check on the table, half the purchase price as the agreed deposit. A strange calm settled over me as I lowered my pen and signed. The final line. The final decision. Victor offered a small, respectful nod. "Congratulations, Ms. Morgan. We'll take good care of this house." For a second, I felt a hollow ache deep in my chest, but also something close to relief. This was the right choice. Before the ink had fully dried, Ethan slammed his coffee mug to the floor, shattering it into pieces. "We're done with you, Rachel." He spat. "Don't expect a family after this." The house was gone, and for the first time in years, so was the constant knot in my chest. My new apartment smelled like fresh paint and cardboard. The walls were bare, the furniture minimal. A sofa, a dining table that doubled as a workspace, and a single potted plant sitting in the corner like a fragile hope. Light from the west-facing windows spilled across the hardwood floor, catching on the unopened boxes labeled with thick black Sharpie. Books, kitchen, office supplies, Grandpa's letters. I sank onto the couch, letting the silence fill every corner. No creaking floorboards from Ethan's late-night pacing. No muffled arguments with Mom over unpaid bills. No passive-aggressive notes taped to my bedroom door. Just quiet. It felt strange, but not bad. I pulled out my phone and scrolled absent-mindedly. An article popped up on my feed. "Breaking free from toxic family patterns." I clicked, reading words that felt uncomfortably familiar. Emotional manipulation, boundary violations, cycles of guilt and obligation. Each bullet point landed like a punch and a balm all at once. A notification buzzed. "Hannah, you surviving day 3 in the new Rachel era?" I smiled and texted back. "Barely. Coffee later?" We met at a small cafe downtown. Hannah slid into the booth across from me, pushing a latte toward my side. "You look different, lighter." "I feel lighter," I admitted. We talked for nearly an hour. About work, about Zurich, about the house. She listened as I described the final signing, the way Ethan had shattered that mug, the empty feeling driving away for the last time. "You did the right thing, Rachel," she said, squeezing my hand across the table. Back home that night, I opened my laptop and buried myself in work. Deadlines didn't wait for personal drama. I answered emails from my team, organized project roadmaps, and drafted a strategy proposal for the European expansion campaign. For the first time in weeks, I slept through the night. By the weekend, the apartment started to feel more like home. I hung framed photos from happier times: my college graduation, a trip to the Grand Canyon with friends, even one of Grandpa and me working on the tulip garden design. His letter now sat in a small frame on my nightstand. Then, on Sunday morning, my phone lit up with a new message. From Mom. Just one line. "We're being evicted. Can you help?" I stared at the screen, my heart twisting in that old, familiar way. Half guilt, half self-preservation. The urge to call, to fix it, to throw money at the problem rose like a reflex. But this time, I hesitated. Instead of scrolling to Mom's contact, I tapped on another number. Diane. As the phone rang, I exhaled slowly. "Diane?" I said when she picked up. "Do you know any good low-income housing assistance programs?" For years, I'd been their safety net. But this time, I chose to be my own. I sat at my small dining table, staring at the list I'd drafted on a yellow legal pad. Local housing assistance programs, workforce reentry resources, financial counseling centers, low-income legal aid. It wasn't a list of excuses. It wasn't a stall tactic. It was help. Just not the kind they were used to. A soft knock broke my concentration. I crossed the apartment and opened the door. There she was. Mom stood in the hallway, her shoulders slumped beneath a faded cardigan. Her hair, usually styled into neat waves, hung limp around her face. Dark circles framed her eyes, and her lips quivered as she tried to summon a smile that never fully appeared. "Rachel," she said, voice cracking on my name. I stepped aside but didn't invite her to sit. Instead, I motioned toward the small breakfast bar where I'd already placed 2 glasses of water. She glanced at the water but didn't touch it. I didn't want to text again. I thought maybe if we talked face to face. Her voice trailed off. "It's been hard. The motel's small. Ethan's miserable. I haven't slept." I nodded, staying quiet. Her eyes welled with tears. I can't believe it's come to this. Me, begging my own daughter for help. I pressed my hands flat against the counter. "You didn't have to beg, Mom. I've been ready to help, but not the way you're expecting." Her head snapped up. "What's that supposed to mean?" I slid the paper toward her. "This is what I can offer. These are resources for affordable housing, job placement, counseling. If you're serious about getting back on your feet, I'll walk with you through every one of these steps." Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again. "You're giving me a list?" "Rachel, this is humiliating." I fought the sting in my chest. What's humiliating is pretending things will change if I keep handing out money like a Band-Aid over a bullet wound. Her face flushed red. "So now you're lecturing me? Acting like you're better? After everything I did for you?" I kept my tone level. "After everything I did for you, Mom. For both of you. Covering bills, cleaning up Ethan's messes, ignoring years of emotional landmines because I thought that's what being family meant." Her lower lip trembled. "I raised you." "Yes," I said softly. "And now I'm raising myself." She stood abruptly, knocking over one of the water glasses. It hit the floor with a sharp crack, water spreading across the tiles. "You're heartless," she spat. I bent, grabbed a towel, and started wiping the floor. "I'm healthy," I corrected, not looking up. Without another word, she grabbed her purse and stormed out, the door slamming behind her with a finality that shook the picture frames on the wall. For a few long moments, I just sat there, listening to the silence settle like dust. I didn't cry. I didn't chase her. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty. My phone buzzed on the counter. A text from Hannah. "Proud of you. Truly." I smiled, small but genuine. Stepping onto the balcony, I looked at the terracotta pot I'd placed by the railing just days earlier. Tiny green shoots pushed through the soil, tulip bulbs I'd planted on a whim. New soil, new roots. The house was gone, but what remained was Rachel's newfound peace, built on hard choices and harder truths. After years of being the family's fallback plan, she had finally chosen herself, drawing a line no amount of guilt could erase. The scars left by betrayal became markers of her strength, and the silence that once felt lonely now stood as proof of her freedom. Like tulips blooming from freshly turned soil, her boundaries weren't endings. They were beginnings. Because when injustice is met with quiet, unwavering resolve, even the deepest roots of manipulation begin to loosen.